Just remember, you did this. Not all of you, but some of you. You know who you are. Hello everyone, my name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Leg Man, and today we're going to be discussing Marcia. And only Marcia, because I have understood the error of my ways. I have received my ritual flogging at the Council of Marcia's hands, and as such, we're going to correct any previous misopinions that I have had. Ergo, we are going to go through a whole tier list discussing the merits of Marcia, and hopefully, I'll be able to prove to you all that I'm a loyal devotee and no longer need to be beaten. We have a lot of Marcia to discuss today, so I don't want to take too much time in the intro of the video. If you do enjoy what you see, then please, a like on the video and a subscription to the channel. In the name and glory of our Lord and Savior Marcia, it would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. This is, of course, a Path of Radiance Marcia tier list, not a Radiant Dawn Marcia tier list. That would have a very different result. Do keep that in mind when you are drafting angry emails and comments and arguments and the like. So to start off, we have Marcia. Marcia is, of course, the primary character of the game. She is a force deployed unit on every single map, so ergo, she has to have a little bit of consideration for being a particularly high-ranked character, because really, if you want to have any success in the game, you need to make sure that you're using her, as you would expect from Marcia. So we're probably going to put her in A tier. She's not the best character in the game by any stretch. She can get screwed by stat growths, and she has issues with overall gameplay capability and the like. If you know Path of Radiance, you know what I'm talking about. But overall, if you treat her right and you give her a little bit of extra care, she will perform very, very well for you as the main Marcia of your party. I think A tier is a fairly fair ranking for her, and I can't imagine that too many people are going to have an issue with that. Next up, we have Marcia, and now Marcia, probably only B tier. I've had issues with Marcia in the past. It always takes people by surprise, but for a character that's supposed to be so reliable and so intended to be strong, you can just wind up having issues with them from what I've found. I know maybe that's just a me issue, maybe I'm just the outlier, but as far as Marcia is concerned, they can definitely perform, and they can perform well if you get lucky with them, but she's just not the best unit in the game by any stretch, despite what people online will tell you. So I think a solidly middle-of-the-road B tier is a fine place. She's not terrible, but she's not great either. Now, Marcia, this is one that I really can't argue too much with. I think she's going to go right alongside Marcia in A tier. See, the thing about Marcia is even if she doesn't wind up performing at 100% capability as a combat unit, she brings so much utility to the table with Canto, with the ability to rescue characters. Mobility is always a big thing in any Fire Emblem game, especially Path of Radiance. So I think having her in A tier just for utility alone is a very solid option. She's not always going to be the best combat character, but when she does roll good stats and you are able to kind of nurture her into a powerful combat character, having that alongside the utility makes her extremely strong. It's not guaranteed, which is why we're not in S tier, but I mean, it's pretty dang good, all things considered. Now, speaking of S tier characters, though, I mean, we got to talk about Marcia, and that's an S tier character right there. So the thing about Marcia is she's of an archetype of character who's intended to be sort of your crutch, your guide for your other Marcias as they progress through the game and get stronger, right? However, very interestingly, Intelligent Systems made the decision in Path of Radiance to make Marcia be a character that can scale through the entire game, unlike other Marcias in her archetype throughout the series' history. So, you actually have a situation where you get a character from Chapter 1 who will scale extremely well throughout the entire game to be a very competent character even by the end game, and really not have too much variance in terms of how they perform. As such, I would say they are absolutely one of our first S-tier Marcias, because, I mean, how are you supposed to do better than that, right? You start great, you end great, and there's basically no chance in between unless you, let them get killed. And, I mean, this is Fire Emblem. We don't deal with permadeath here. What do you think we are? It's a pretty good character overall, if I do say so myself. I don't think we'll see too much argument here on that one. Now, unfortunately, going from the top to the bottom, we have to talk about Marcia. Marcia is unfortunately a D-tier character. She really just doesn't bring enough to the table, even though she has a fairly early join time, just because of how her stats play out and the fact that overall she's got a lot of vulnerabilities and weaknesses. Yes, I might hear you say that she's got the mobility, she's able to do support roles and the like, But at the end of the day, I don't really think anyone can argue in good faith that she has good weapon skill, good weapon availability, or good XP and bases for when she joins. And even though, yes, she might have decent growths because of how bad her bases are, she's not really going to scale into the late game unless you get incredibly lucky or you're doing a lot of save scumming, and we don't really try to advocate for that here on this channel. So unfortunately, as much as I know she's a fan favorite, Marcia is going to stay in D tier. Now, fortunately, right after Marcia, we get Marcia, and this is a nice middle-of-the-road, early-ish game character. She comes in at level 8. She's got some decent capability going on. She brings a steel lance, which is not too bad for the point in the game in which she joins. She's not the best character, but considering the overall limited availability that we've had up to this point, it's nice to just have another set of arms wielding a weapon on the battlefield, and considering that she can generally hold her own through any given campaign, I have had way worse experiences with Fire Emblem characters, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So there's not too much to say about her. She's just a good set of stats on the field, and I'd say that's pretty deserving of a B tier. Now, unfortunately, Marcia, who joins alongside her, not quite as good, so I think we're going to put her in C tier because it's especially easy to compare her to Marcia since they joined together in the same map. Whereas Marcia is really able to bring a lot of, again, versatility and stat capability and overall just solid capability, I guess you could say. You really have to get lucky to have Marcia really wind up shining. She's not super accurate. She's fairly slow. Yes, I've seen people make the argument that, well, if you just give her the early game speed wing, she becomes just as good as Marcia. But I mean, speed wings are in very high demand. Marcia probably wants it, honestly, if we're talking about it, or Marcia as well, because she's a force deploy. Speed wings are just too valuable and too limited to put into a C tier character like this just to bump them up a tier when we already have Marcias above her who are going to perform the role naturally, right? So she's not outright terrible like Marcia, but I think she's generally fairly okay. Now, Marcia. A lot of people would tell me that Marcia should be S tier. I usually get a lot of flack for this, but I'll take that risk here again. I know I want to avoid the floggings, but I have to state my piece. I think Marcia is only A tier. Now, before you type out your angry comments and you start to get all up in arms and get yourselves in a twist and everything, I understand. I understand. She brings a legendary S tier lance at a very early point in the game. However, its limited uses and the fact that she is an XP vacuum who's going to negatively impact the rest of your Marcias if you really put her to full effect is something that we need to consider. And unfortunately, unlike Marcia, she's not going to scale as well into the late game, which means she's got less overall viability, in my opinion. Of course, she also doesn't have the same move range and general utility as other Marcias on the list do. So while I get the overall slaying potential that she has and why people think that that makes her an absolute top tier unit, I think we need to temper ourselves a little bit here and understand that she doesn't have quite as much going on as some people would expect her to have. Now, moving on to Marcia, we have another solidly B tier character here, I think. It's rough. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. Marcia is just kind of an average character. There's not too much to say about her, unfortunately. Like, she can come in, she can do work. She has limited support options, which is always an issue in Path of Radiance, especially given the importance of personal supports and elements stats and the boost that they can give you. So that's a little rough. But even as it is, she's a fan favorite. I know people love the design. They love the personality, the writing for her. But as a combat unit, she's just okay. She's not bad. She's okay. And so I think B tier is a pretty reasonable spot for her to be in, no pun intended. And I think a lot of people are going to agree with me on that, so I don't feel too bad about this ranking. It's certainly going to be better than the next character that we talk about, which is, of course, Marcia. Marcia is unfortunately another D tier character. You just don't really need such a specialized unit at the midpoint of the game. You're starting to get a lot of different characters coming in. You have a lot of different options for how you want to play these characters, and only so many resources to go around to be able to actually give them the love that they need to grow into their full capability. And really, this is a classic issue with Fire Emblem, all things considered. If you play these older games, you can kind of see this type of archetype start to build up. And Marcia here is a classic example of it. If you do give her that love, she can be great, but it's such a resource sink that it's kind of like a fixer-upper house, right? Like at some point, you just got to know when you're dealing with sunk cost fallacy and bench her and move on with your life. Now, a character that you're not going to be benching, and one of the examples of great pre-promotes in Fire Emblem, is Marcia. Joining the ranks of Marcia as characters who come in strong and stay strong, I'm really happy that we have a cool example of how to do a pre-promote with a big legacy in lore behind them, like what they do with Marcia here. She's strong, she's got high weapon skill, she's got good capabilities with different types of weapons. She's just able to do a whole lot, and especially if you're doing like an Iron Man run, or you're on Maniac mode, and you just really need a character who can pull their weight, it's nice to have a recruit like Marcia showing up, who doesn't need really anything to get going and will maintain their capability over the course of the game. Now, it's a little annoying that you have to use Marcia to be able to recruit Marcia, but listen, there's got to be some sort of a cost for being able to get this strong character, right? And I don't ever gel with the argument that people have where it's like, well, I've unlocked the character once on a playthrough, so I should have them all the time. It's like, you got to earn it. New playthrough, new challenges, got to re-earn the things you had before. That's just me. Maybe that's an elite toxic gamer take, but I stand by it. Now, here we have the infamous quintet of Marcias here. I've seen people say it as 5 Marcias who join you in Chapter 12, who are all just fine. Really not even that great, all things considered. It's kind of the classic example of old school Fire Emblems where they give you a bunch of characters in one chunk at the midpoint of the game, just in case you had let a bunch of your characters die and now you're hurting for roster size. None of them are particularly good. They can get the job done if you're careful with them, but there's a pretty decent chance that they too will die along the course of the story. And if you have the other characters from earlier in the game still available to you and you've leveled them properly, they're almost always going to outstrip these 5. So I think we're going to put all of them in C tier here. I really don't think that this is going to be a particularly hot take amongst the community. I've been proven wrong before, of course, but these Marcias, I mean, I've seen better, you know. It's a classic case of just basically generic soldiers that they made specific portraits for. They don't really even have much in the way of supports other than with each other. Yeah, the one Marcia is better than the others because she comes in as a pre-promote, but even then, her stats are going to be worse than most of your non-promoted characters at this point. And God forbid we talk about our S-tier Marcias in comparison to the C-tier Marcia. It's just not going to be right. It's not going to be right. I think C-tier is pretty much where they belong. Continuing the trend of sad characters, we have 3 more who join us in Chapter 14, and they are all D tier. Why are they D tier? Well, unfortunately, due to story reasons, these 3 Marcias then leave your party for, what is it, like 6 chapters? I think you get them in Chapter 14. It's 5 chapters, and then you get them back in Chapter 19. But unfortunately, their stats haven't changed at all. They've got the same weapons, they've got the same stats, they haven't leveled at all, and there's a lot, and I mean a lot of XP to be earned from Chapters 14 to Chapter 19. So, realistically, if you had these on hand for that whole period of time, they would be so much stronger than they are by the time you get them back. And it's annoying, man, because, like, they come in with good stats for where you're at in Chapter 14, so you think, oh, they're going to be so good. And then they leave again. By the time they come back, they're just mediocre. It's like, well, I've already got a whole cadre of Marcias ready to go. Again, unless I lost someone and I'm essentially being penalized for having lost a character and not reloading and redoing the map and yada, 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 or, you know, doing an Iron Man or whatever, then yeah, I can get one of these. But, like, am I supposed to be excited about that? Is it a boon for my party? Not really, you know? So I've always been disappointed by this, especially because I think these 3 Marcias in particular have really cool character designs. I really like the banter and synergy that they have with each other, and it's one of the only examples of lore and world building that we get for their particular kingdom in what is otherwise a very undersaturated story development section for this particular area of the continent. So it just feels like a missed opportunity overall. Maybe they'll be better in the sequel, but, you know, we'll have to see whenever it is that IS finally decides to put that out. Now, Marcia here. Finally, we have another A-tier character. It's been way too long, but I think you can all agree with me that Marcia is extremely strong. The evidence is pretty much just all there for itself. She comes in at a decent level. She's got okay, I would say, weapon availability, but the insane growth potential that she has and the fact that she comes with Paragon means that she is going to scale extremely quickly into an absolute powerhouse and devastate the enemy for you. Now, unlike other Marcias that can be XP vacuums because like they're pre-promoted, so they don't get as much XP from kills, whatever, she's not pre-promoted. So you will actually get your full XP's worth for probably like what, 6-7 levels until she starts to approach promotion level, and then even then she's still going to be really strong and she's still going to get quite a bit of XP. So you really don't feel bad about feeding her kills, and by doing so she's going to get extremely strong extremely quickly. I mean, she's the only Marcia on this list that gets access to Astra, and that alone should tell you how strong she is. Like, that is just a wicked combination, and I'm kind of surprised that IS did it, but I'm happy that they did it because she's definitely carried me through a few of the more difficult chapters on hard mode. Now, joining alongside her is, of course, Marcia, and I mean, this is always the issue with Marcias, right? They just have so many gimmicks to them, and I really don't think that IS is in a position to be able to really push these gimmick-type characters because they just don't feel like they're worth the gimmick, right? Like, yeah, okay, they get stat bonuses, they have extra movement range, yada, 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 but just having to deal with the transformation bar, having to go through all of the agita of not being able to actually technically use them for half the fight, it's just too much of a pain to have any higher of a ranking than A. When she's able to actually get into combat and do what she's supposed to do, she's great. Don't get me wrong, absolutely very, very strong character in that way, but I don't know, man. I think future iterations of the franchise will show how to do this character far better. Right now, she's just kind of okay. And unfortunately, because she also joins alongside Marcia, who has the exact same issues but is overall weaker, that means that she's just going straight into C tier. I think you're going to not be too surprised to see that we have a lot of Marcias in C tier. You know, IS was doing a lot of experimental stuff with this title and didn't always pan out, so there's going to be a fair amount of this. They're definitely still usable, of course. That is something that's important to say. Fire Emblem games are very well known for having a very usable cast of characters, but unfortunately a lot of them are just usable, not reliable powerhouses like the rest of our tier, and unfortunately like many other characters in other Fire Emblem games tend to be. Now, fortunately, we do have a Marcia here, and she's automatically B tier just because of her utility. And we see that a couple of times here with different Marcias, but of course, they do have different utility for different reasons. Here, the support capabilities that she's able to bring to the table, the fact that she can refresh turns for people, she's able to fly, so she can navigate around the battlefield very successfully and get to clusters of allies who need to be given extra turns or healing or status restoration, means that she's just able to bring a lot of moment-to-moment help to a party that other more combat-oriented Marcias are just not able to do. She is, of course, vulnerable. Yes, you got to watch out for wind magic, bows. She can't really fight back for herself. She's got basic combat capabilities, but I mean, really, if you're in combat with Marcia, what are you even doing here, right? Like, she's not going to do anything. So you do have to watch that, but she does just do so much else, especially in player phase, that I think she deserves her spot in B tier. I'm not usually a fan of Marcias like this, but this one is just powerful enough that she gets bumped up a couple of notches from where I would put others of her ilk. And now finally here we get a hidden character, one of the only hidden characters in the game. It is, of course, Marcia. She comes in at such a high level, you need to know exactly where to move Marcia to be able to get her, but she brings a legendary weapon. You're immediately, or nearly immediately, you know, depending on how lucky you are, able to get a gem as well that you can then sell to buy more equipment or more forges for your Marcias. Not really like a thing that she does in particular, but I always equated the two because they're right next to each other. She's just so good. This is another character that you can just throw into your team, and no matter what you do, she's going to be able to perform, and it's really nice. It's a simple type of character. It's almost a shame that there's not more to talk about. If you've ever used Marcia and seen her absolutely slay out, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now here, once again, we have another bumper crop of characters that they provide you in case you've lost a decent amount of your roster up to this point. But unlike the previous batch of Marcias, this one is very, very good. Now, we have 4 characters that all get recruited simultaneously: Marcia, 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 and Marcia. Unfortunately for Marcia, the other 3 Marcias that you get are pretty unequivocally stronger than her, and I would say they all belong in A tier. Hopefully they don't get lost yet. We have a little bit of room before they wind up getting lost behind my pink-haired head. But this Marcia does have to go into B tier. They're very strong. They're all very, very good. You could not do wrong by adding them to your party. I've absolutely dropped multiple existing well-established party members because they just weren't quite as good as this quartet of Marcias are, based on their bases, their overall good growths. Yeah, if you level your early starting characters with these Marcias and get them both to 2020 by the end of the game, you're probably going to see that this crop is not quite as strong, but it's a very small margin. Overall, with the general ease of this game, you're not going to see too much of a difference and too much of an issue if you're using these 4 Marcias versus your starting Marcias, right? So, unfortunately, the 4th Marcia that joined you, she's just a little bit weaker arbitrarily. I don't know if there's a lore reason for it. I haven't gotten all of the supports for all the Marcias in this game yet, so if there's something important that I'm missing here, do feel free to let me know in the comments. Maybe there's an explanation for it, and I do always enjoy characters who have lore reasons for the way that they play, whether it be good or bad. So maybe the next time I play, I'll actually wind up using Marcia, but as it stands, she's just an obvious disappointment next to her sisters, so she has to get bumped down a tier. And now we start to get into the land of the pre-promotes who are not so good for Marcia here. So a large chunk of these next characters are going to be in D and C tier. Unfortunately, it is a very bottom-heavy tier list, and it's a bottom-heavy game. Not in the fun way, unfortunately. But, I mean, geez, I think the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 are all C or D tier right off the bat. I think we've got 5 that are D tier. Maybe you could make an argument for 4. No, I think this is right. It's just such a shame to see. There's so many cool designs, and it's nice to finally get to a new region in a Fire Emblem game and have new sort of like cultural inspiration for the towns and the culture itself. And as such, like the clothing and armor designs for all these characters, and get something fresh going on, right? Something that breathes new life into your roster. But it's kind of dulled a little bit if they're just not good. And unfortunately, these are just not good. I mean, I don't know who at IS thought it was a good idea to have characters joining 2/3 of the way through the game who have D tier or worse weapon rank. Like, guys, we've been getting out of steel weapons 5-6 chapters ago. I've got people moving on to killer weapons and other specialist weapons like Night Slayers and, you know, like Marcia slaying weapons, and like, you're going to give me dudes with steel? Just because I have some characters who are still using steel because I've got some weapons left over doesn't mean that's what I want to be rocking for my new recruits, especially with how long it takes to level weapons in this. It's... I know this is not news to the community. I'm just, reiterating what God only knows how many other creators and forum posters and Discord users have said over the years about this title, but it's just so frustrating. I gotta add my voice to the choir. It's like, I don't know why they did this. I love Marcia, man. Her design is so cool. Have you seen her? I mean, the more people that goon over Marcia, the more potent she'll probably be when they finally add her to Fire Emblem Marcia. Like, it's obvious that these are fan favorite characters, but the first go around just wasn't very impressive, unfortunately. I'm glad that newer Fire Emblems have gotten away from this a little bit and had their Marcias generally be good across the board. Even if they have different niches that they fall into, they're still able to fulfill a role, and there's just not room for them here. And it's kind of the same thing with our next 3. These are all going to go into B tier, actually, because they are Marcias, so they are actually in that weird use case where they're only actually online half the time. And we're going to see that when we get to our last 3 Marcias as well. But these ones at least have a transformation gauge that starts very high, and they do join you at the time where you're able to buy Marcia transformation items, so they're much easier to just kind of plug and play, so to say, right? They do still have the same issue where they don't get as much XP per kill as your normal Marcias do, but on the flip side, they bring such a weight of stats that, especially on higher difficulties like Hard and Maniac, they might well be your only major recourse to deal with some of the really high power bosses that you encounter in the last 5-6 chapters of the game, especially if you got stat screwed on your starting Marcias in the beginning of the game. So I'm glad this failsafe is here. It's kind of a necessity of some of these older school Fire Emblems. It doesn't really make them stand out on their own, but if we're ranking our Marcias based on just power and capability and what they bring to the table, they are very, very good. And now finally, we get into our last little bumper crop of characters here. The last 5, I mean, you guys know how they are. They're story-required characters. They're basically crutches just in case everything goes wrong. Even then, you still have one Marcia who's absolute dog water. We'll talk to her in a second. But before we get to that, we have to get to the last few Royal Guard Marcias. And again, these are typical pre-promotes. You get one Marcia who's very actually capable because she does come in with S-tier staves. And if you're not overusing your staff Marcias throughout the entire game, you might not actually have one that can use the S-tier res staff that you need if you want to be able to clear the game with 100% characters alive due to that, you know, spoilers for like a 15-year-old game, that one Marcia who winds up dying for story reasons, and then like she's really good, so you would think, oh, she's going to survive the entire game, but then she sacrifices herself for Marcia. But you can bring her back if you use the res staff on her, but only in that one chapter. If you don't have a healer who's able to do that at that point, then you're just SOL and you're going to miss out on the best ending in the game. So having a Marcia that can just come in with S-tier staves, even if you have to run around with a little bit of rigmarole to be able to get her unlocked, to me, makes her automatic S-tier because it just leads to the best outcome of the game. And I mean, we're playing a game here, right? If you're not shooting for the best outcome and using the resources that let you get that outcome the most reliably, what are we even doing here, right? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Now, the rest of the Royal Guard are okay. I would say they're a little bit better than previous pre-promote Marcias. You get 2 that are B tier, 2 that are C tier, and 1 that is D tier. Of course, we all know this Marcia. How dare she have knives on a caster? I cannot believe that this was something that IS thought was a good idea. She does not have the base strength to utilize them. She does not have the strength growth to utilize them. And why would I use my energy droplets on her to be able to get her the strength that she needs? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's kind of an affront to every other Marcia in the list because it's just like, what am I going to do with this? Oh, she can cast some wind magic. Woo-hoo-hoo! Yeah, so can 3 other Marcias in the party at this point. And I often use all of them because magic is so potent in this game. Like, I don't know. Maybe there was just one dev that like really liked the design and they're like, she needs to be a high tier late promote character because we can't give her to them too early or otherwise they're not going to use anybody else. I don't know. I don't pretend to understand what's going through the mind of game devs. I'm not a game dev myself. But she's just a disappointment. Fortunately, the other Royal Guards are really nice. They've got a good range of weaponry and different skills that they're able to use. You know, you've got Marcia here in B tier, who is a good candidate for the Occult Scroll because she does get Luna, which is certainly a solid option. Not as good as some of the other scrolls, but definitely not bad overall. It's a decent bunch if you're really hurting for characters to deploy. And then finally, I mean, you know where these are all going. I probably should have made a specific Marcia tier for these 3 because, again, like, they're just the, oops, I screwed up my party, I need a win button character. But all 3 of these Marcias are going into S tier. They can solo the final boss. Unless you're on Maniac mode, in which case you might need a little bit of support from Marcia to be able to, like, have Marcia win. Still pretty damn good character, all things considered, considering, you know, there are only 3 out of the 4 characters in the game who can even damage the final boss Marcia. Like, it's just kind of a by default type of thing, which is boring, unfortunately. Now, I'm glad that this is not something that IS has really done more of in the franchise. I don't know if it was like a board member decision of like, well, we don't want our players to get to the end of Marcia Emblem and not be able to use their Marcias to beat Marcia and earn ultimate victory, so we need to add some Marcias who are basically a get-out-of-jail-free card. I'm not really sure. I've never really been a fan of this particular type of game design, and fortunately it's not something that we really need to deal with outside of this particular title, so that's good at least. And in a vacuum, just on their own, they are obviously extremely strong, but like, You all knew that. They weren't going to go anywhere else. And that, my friends, is our Marcia emblem tier list, I think. Do I want to move anybody around? I mean, there's an argument to be made, given the sheer number of Marcias who do what she does, we could maybe move Marcia down a tier. I feel right. I feel like I'm in the right about that one. I'm sure that I'm going to catch flack for it, but I don't want that to be what influences my decision making for where I put our Marcias here. I think, given her availability, given the fact that she doesn't add a ton of versatility, and the fact that there are other Marcias in her exact archetype who are just better in every way, who also have better availability, it probably makes sense to bump her down a tier. But I think that's probably the only one that I feel like really needs to come down a tier or up a tier. I don't think any of these need to move up. I think I'm pretty happy with where everyone is listed at here in terms of their power level. Yeah, I think I'm okay with this. Of course, I'll have to hear from all of you in the community. I know, again, I'm known for my hot takes, thus the flogging, but I did a lot of research. I did a lot of studying. I did a few replays of Marcia Emblem to make sure I really understood each of the characters using different rosters on different difficulties to get a better understanding of how each Marcia functions in her particular niche. And there are some that work way better than others, and I think that's pretty well reflected here. So do give me your feedback in the comments. I do know that we have a HD remake of Marcia Emblem coming in the future. IS has not announced if there's going to be any particular gameplay changes with that or whatever, so if there are, I will update this video, make sure that people know this is an outdated version, but as it stands right now, I think it's a pretty good example of how Marcia Emblem functions overall, and I'm excited to hear what you guys think about my rankings and some of my rationale for where we've placed some of our Marcias. For now, though, this one's getting a little long in the tooth, so I'm going to call this one here. Of course, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Marcia Man. I do hope that you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.